This year, Turkey celebrates 100 years since the founding of the modern republic. Exactly a century ago, in 1923, the Ottoman Sultanate, which had been one of the world's most powerful empires, was officially abolished. This was soon followed by the final abolition of the Ottoman Caliphate by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk in March 1924. This pivotal moment not only marked the birth of modern Turkey, but also brought a definitive end to the political and religious institution of the Caliphate, a system of spiritual and temporal leadership that had existed for more than 300 years in various forms. At a glance, Turkey's independence may seem to mirror the independence movements of other nations in the 20th century. However, Turkey's situation was profoundly unique. While most countries gained their freedom by breaking away from colonial powers like Britain, France, or Italy, Turkey's independence was a far more complex affair. It was a nation-state that broke away from its own centuries-old imperial system. In essence, Turkey's freedom meant the complete and total dismantling of the very Ottoman state that had ruled over vast Muslim lands for centuries, and in doing so, it severed a critical link to the broader Islamic world. The fall of the last caliph. The last caliph was Sultan Abdulmajid II, a member of the illustrious House of Osman, the same dynasty that had ruled for approximately 600 years. The Ottoman sultans were not merely rulers of Anatolia, modern Turkey. They were emperors whose domains stretched across 3 continents, encompassing parts of southeastern Europe, much of the Middle East, and large portions of North Africa. This immense territorial reach was a testament to the empire's long history and power. On March 3, 1924, in a move that shook the entire Muslim world, Abdulmajid and his family were forced into exile by Ataturk and the newly formed Turkish government. The royal family was stripped of their titles, assets, and citizenship. This act marked the final and irrevocable dissolution of the Ottoman Caliphate, an institution that, for centuries, had claimed the mantle of spiritual leadership over the global Muslim community. The caliph, once the symbol of a unified Islamic polity, was now a refugee, and his title a historical artifact. Where the Turks came from. Origins of a people. The land we now call Turkey was not originally inhabited by the Turks. The people who make up the modern Turkish nation are the descendants of Turkic tribes from Central Asia, a vast region spanning modern-day Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and other surrounding areas. Historically, Anatolia, modern Turkey, was a crossroads of civilizations. It was home to Greeks, Romans, and Armenians, and it formed the heartland of the Byzantine Empire, the continuation of the Eastern Roman Empire, for nearly 1,000 years. Before the arrival of Islam, the various Turkic peoples had little to no influence on the political and cultural affairs of the Mediterranean or Middle Eastern worlds. They were largely nomadic, known for their equestrian skills and military prowess, and their religious practices were a blend of shamanism and animism. The coming of Islam and the first caliphates. The rise of Islam in the 7th century CE irrevocably changed the global landscape. Within just a few decades after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in 632 CE, the early Muslim community, led by the first 4 Rashidun caliphs, the rightly guided caliphs, expanded far beyond the Arabian Peninsula. They defeated 2 of the world's ancient superpowers, the Byzantine, Eastern Roman Empire in the west, and the Sasanian Persian Empire in the east. This rapid expansion laid the foundation for a new and dynamic civilization. The Rashidun Caliphate lasted for only about 30 years before a dynastic succession led to the establishment of the Umayyad Caliphate in 661 CE. The Umayyads ruled a vast and expanding empire from their capital in Damascus. However, a significant flaw in their governance was their policy of favoring Arabs for high positions in the military and administration, which created deep resentment among the empire's rapidly growing non-Arab Muslim populations, particularly the Persians and Berbers. This tension, along with internal conflicts, eventually led to their overthrow by the Abbasid dynasty around 750 CE, the Abbasid Golden Age. The Abbasid Caliphate was fundamentally different from its predecessor. They adopted a more inclusive approach, embracing diversity by appointing Persians, Turks, Berbers, and other non-Arabs to positions of power and influence. This policy attracted the best minds from all corners of the Muslim world to Baghdad, the new Abbasid capital. Baghdad became a global center of learning, science, literature, and trade, and was famously home to the House of Wisdom, a magnificent library and academy. This period is now widely known as the Golden Age of Islam. It was a time of unprecedented intellectual and scientific progress. Scholars made groundbreaking advancements in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, chemistry, and engineering. During this era, literary masterpieces like 1001 Nights, with its famous tales of Aladdin, Ali Baba, and Sinbad, were popularized and compiled, reflecting the cosmopolitan and imaginative spirit of the time. The Turks enter the Islamic world. As the Abbasid Caliphate expanded its influence into Central Asia, many Turkic tribes began to embrace Islam. The first major Turkic leader to accept the faith was Seljuk, whose descendants would later found the Seljuk Empire. The Seljuks became a formidable military force, migrating westward and establishing a vast dominion that stretched from Central Asia to Anatolia. Despite their power, the Seljuk rulers, who were known as sultans, deeply respected the spiritual authority of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, who retained the title of Caliph. The Sultan was the temporal ruler, and the Caliph was the spiritual head of the Muslim community, a powerful but symbolic distinction that would shape the political landscape for centuries. The westward migration of Turkic tribes into Anatolia intensified after the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, a decisive victory where the Seljuk forces defeated the Byzantine army. This victory broke Byzantine power in the region and opened the door for a gradual but steady Turkic settlement and eventual Islamization of Anatolia. The rise of the Ottomans. Among the many Turkic tribes that settled in Anatolia was a small group led by a chieftain named Ertuğrul Gazi. He was granted a small domain, Beylik, in northwestern Anatolia by the Seljuk Sultan for his military service. It was Ertuğrul's son, Osman Gazi, also known as Othman, who would lay the foundations for what would become the Ottoman Empire. His small domain steadily grew through a combination of military victories and strategic alliances, and over the next century, his descendants expanded it into a powerful state. The Ottomans were different from earlier Muslim empires in their focus. They concentrated less on fighting other Muslim states and more on expanding into Christian Europe. This strategy allowed them to consolidate their power and gain prestige among the broader Muslim community. Their greatest triumph came in 1453, when Sultan Mehmed II, known as the Conqueror, captured Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, after a 53-day siege. This monumental victory not only fulfilled a prophecy attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, but also made the Ottomans heroes in the eyes of the Muslim world. Still, at this time, they continued to use the title Sultan, while the Abbasid Caliph, who had been relocated to Cairo after the Mongol sack of Baghdad, retained the spiritual title. The Caliphate moves to the Ottomans. The formal transfer of the Caliphate to the Ottomans occurred in 1517. Sultan Selimyrt, a formidable military leader, defeated the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt. This victory more than doubled the size of the Ottoman Empire, and crucially, gave them control over the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. After his conquest, Selim brought the last Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mutawakkil III, back to Istanbul. There, in a symbolic ceremony, the Caliph formally transferred the title, along with sacred relics of the Prophet Muhammad, including his sword and mantle, to Selim. From that moment forward, the Ottoman Sultan was also the Caliph, the political and spiritual leader of the Sunni Muslim world. This dual role gave the Ottomans immense legitimacy and prestige, allowing them to project power and influence far beyond their borders. Peak power and decline. At its zenith, the Ottoman Caliphate was the most powerful empire in the world. However, no empire is immune to the forces of change and decline. Europe, which had once been militarily and technologically inferior, was transformed by the age of exploration and trade. The discovery of the Americas by Christopher Columbus brought a flood of wealth to European states, funding their naval expansion and industrial development. Concurrently, the Ottomans began facing internal weaknesses that would eventually prove to be their undoing. One of the most damaging long-term mistakes was the rejection of the printing press. While Europe's literacy rate soared and knowledge spread rapidly, Ottoman scholars and officials declared that printing in Arabic script was forbidden, haram. This decision kept books rare and education limited in the Muslim world for nearly 2 centuries. By the time the ban was finally lifted in the 18th century, Europe had surged far ahead in science, technology, and governance. Additionally, political intrigues within the Ottoman court, particularly the growing influence of royal wives and concubines, many of whom were of European origin, caused significant instability. This period, known as the Sultanate of Women, saw palace politics and personal ambition often override effective governance. Collapse in the modern era. By the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire had been derisively nicknamed the sick man of Europe. Its once vast territories shrank as nationalist movements in the Balkans and the Middle East, fueled by the rising tide of European imperialism, chipped away at its holdings. The final blow came during World War I. The Ottomans, aligning themselves with Germany and the Central Powers, found themselves on the losing side of the conflict. The defeat led to the occupation of Istanbul and the infamous Treaty of Sèvres, which sought to carve up the remaining Ottoman lands among the victorious Allied powers, Britain, France, and Italy. Arab leaders, many of whom had been loyal to the Ottomans for centuries, allied with the British against them, further weakening the empire and leading to its eventual collapse. In the midst of this chaos, a national hero emerged, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. He led a successful war of independence, pushing out the occupying forces and establishing a new Turkish state. In 1922, he officially abolished the Sultanate, ending the political rule of the House of Osman. Finally, on October 29, 1923, he declared the Republic of Turkey. Less than 5 months later, on March 3, 1924, he formally abolished the Caliphate and expelled the last caliph. Ataturk's reforms. Ataturk was determined to transform Turkey into a secular Western-style nation. His reforms were sweeping and radical, aimed at severing all ties to the Ottoman Islamic past and creating a new national identity. These reforms included language reform, replacing the Arabic script of the Turkish language with a new simplified Latin alphabet. This was a massive undertaking that aimed to increase literacy and distance Turkey from its Ottoman and Islamic heritage. Dress code, banning religious clothing like the hijab and the fez in state institutions and public spaces, promoting Western-style dress. Call to prayer. For 18 years, the Arabic adhan, call to prayer, was banned and replaced with a Turkish version. The word Allah was even replaced with the Turkish word Tanrı for a time. Education, removing Islamic education from public schools and replacing it with a secular curriculum. Political suppression, using the military and a powerful new government to suppress any attempt to restore Islamic governance or the Caliphate. These revolutionary changes erased the last remnants of Ottoman Islamic political authority from Turkey and cemented its place as a secular republic. Conclusion: 100 years without a caliph. It has now been 100 years since the abolition of the Caliphate. For over a millennium, the Caliphate had been the central political and spiritual institution of the Muslim world. Its fall in 1924 marked not just the end of Ottoman rule, but the end of a system that had, for centuries, provided a sense of unity and collective leadership to much of the Muslim world. Whether this event was an act of liberation or a profound loss remains a fiercely debated topic among historians and Muslims today, but its impact on global Muslim history is undeniable. The end of the Caliphate forced Muslims to grapple with new questions of identity, nation-statehood, and the role of religion in a modern world. The legacy of this single seismic event continues to shape political and religious thought across the Islamic world.